Well, let me begin by welcoming you to our home here at the National Cable and Telecommunication Association. This is a unique and unusual way to launch legislation, but it is reflective of a uniquely complex and critical problem. So we are thrilled to play host to the distinguished members of Congress who are here with us, who we will bring up shortly, with regard to one of the most pressing issues facing the United States. Cyber threat is deeply frightening. There is a community out there in the world that tries with great diligence to undermine the economic viability of the American public through corporate espionage. There are those that wish the American people harm through cyber attack, threatening the very national security of our shores. And there are those engaged in criminal enterprise whose sole purpose is to steal and defraud the good treasure of a good, hardworking people. This is a threat that will be with us forever. It is a threat that requires bold and innovative solutions, but most importantly, it's a problem that requires a phalanx, an armada of constituencies to come together and work effectively. It's not an exaggeration to say, when it comes to cybersecurity, what you don't know can hurt you. And one of the most valuable aspects of this legislation is it deals with the most critical problem when industries and government face a challenge like this: inadequate information flow. You can't fix what you don't know. You can't work in cooperation and coordination with others when you're not able to effectively share information. I think the legislation we'll hear about today takes a dramatic and important step. I speak from some experience, having chaired the Federal Communication Commission and served as the National Security Commissioner for the United States. I had the challenge of going through the Y2K transition. I had the challenge of leading the country through the restoration of communications networks in the 9/11 crisis. And I can tell you one of the most valuable aspects of those missions meant that we could put industry and government together in partnership to share information in a trusted and secure space and begin to share best practices and adequately attack the problem. And that's what the core of this legislation does today. As I said, to provide for the common defense requires a trusted partnership. And to build that partnership, I applaud the focus on a non-prescriptive, overly regulatory approach, and one that really invites people into the process both in their self-interest and shared common interest. And I am very confident that this is a critical first step in improving the security of our country and the protection of our citizens. So I am thrilled on behalf of NCTA to support this legislation with great vigor, great confidence, and great encouragement that we're joined by so many companies who see the equal and important mission that's before us. I am particularly proud to be here and joined by two of my favorite people, also leaders of the broadband industry, among the three of us who collectively have the privilege of representing essentially most ISPs in the United States. I think we see these things equally. It's my pleasure to introduce them to you and have them each come up and say a few words. First, no stranger to any of you, is Steve Largent, the head of CTIA, the Wireless Association, a tremendous leader of that industry, a former member of Congress who ably represented the people of Oklahoma, a terrific partner, and of course a Hall of Fame wide receiver who's currently walking around the streets of Washington in shame, having lost to the Washington Redskins last weekend. But we'll forgive him that. And he's here with us today. And also my dear friend, Walter McCormick, the CEO of the U.S. Telecom Association, another critical partner in the effort to bring broadband to America in a secure and a compelling way. Walter has a decade of experience at his association, also having served in government as the general counsel of the Senate Commerce Committee, as well as the Department of Transportation. So he has a deep and abiding understanding of critical infrastructure and the importance of protection. And so with that, it's my pleasure to bring up Steve and then Walter. Steve, please join us.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'll make my comments very brief and just say what a pleasure it is to be here this morning. Mike and Dutch, I really admire what you're doing. You're doing it the right way, and I think it's about the only way we're going to get anything through Congress this year is working in a bipartisan fashion. But this is a really critically important issue for the wireless industry, as it is for wireline and cable and many and Americans, not just our industries, but for Americans. Today, the wireless industry uses cutting-edge tools to measure, assess, and mitigate cybersecurity risks. We do this because our customers depend on us to provide robust, secure solutions for government, for corporate and individual communications needs. However, we know there are threats from groups and individuals who seek to exploit any and every vulnerability they can for profit or for political ends. And we have to fight these cybersecurity risks. Better sharing of information between carriers and their vendors and the federal government is a vital tool to combat these nefarious efforts. That's why CTIA applauds both Chairman Rogers and Dutch for their leadership in introducing this legislation to help us address this issue. Enhanced sharing of information between government and the private sector, as well as among entities within the private sector, will help improve security by disseminating real-time information designed to target and defeat cyber attacks. At the same time, CTI urges that information sharing flexibility be coupled with safeguards to ensure that critical cyber defense information is shielded from disclosure to parties that should not have access to it, as well as to ensure that a true partnership exists between government and private sector as we work to protect critical communications networks. We're really pleased that the chairman had heard our call and that his bill reflects these priorities. So CTI looks forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of your colleagues to see information sharing legislation move forward at the earliest possible date. So with that, I'll pass it on to Walter.
Steve, thank you very much, and Michael, thank you very much for your very generous comments. We're really proud to be here today with you, Chairman Rogers, and with you, Ranking Member Ruppersberger. This is really an incredible accomplishment. My association represents broadband service providers in markets large and small, urban and rural. I know how difficult it is to get our members united behind something. And Michael, Steve, and I, while friends, very good friends, represent industries that are intensely competitive. Just to give you a sense of it, in our conference room, we have an American flag. Michael puts 2 American flags in his conference room. So when we look at an initiative that brings together industry and government, Republicans and Democrats, we know it's about something that has to be singularly important, crucial to our future. And cybersecurity is that kind of an issue. Every day, our companies, wireless, cable, telecommunications, are working to address cybersecurity attacks. But we can do so much better. We can do so much more if we're able to share information with the government in a way that is protected, in a way that really is in partnership. So this legislation will make that possible. We're really grateful to you, and we're honored to be a part of this process today.
So in a second, I'm going to bring up the chairman, but I did want to make a special note to thank the ranking member, Congressman Ruppersberger, for being with us. Your leadership is invaluable as well, and we thank you for joining us, and we thank you for your leadership on this critical issue. I'm now proud to introduce a good friend and a great leader, the chairman of the Permanent Select Intelligence Committee, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, who have served the people of the United States since 2001, as well as the great citizens of the state of Michigan. He has worn proudly the uniform of the United States, both in service as an officer in the United States Army, as well as an officer of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That is a unique combination that makes him uniquely qualified on national security interests, which has led and enabled him to make such a significant impact, not only in energy and commerce, but on an issue like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to bring up with you Chairman Mike Rogers. Mike.
Well, thank you, Michael, very much. I appreciate that. I think the big news of the day is actually a Republican and Democrat sitting next to each other. maybe even working together and we have over the last several months to make today possible. I want to thank Walter. Thank you very, very much, Steve. Thank you very much. And Michael, I want to personally thank you for your advice and counsel along the way in getting us here today where we can finally, I think, take the very first and important step when it comes to starting to secure our networks in a way that protects our intellectual property and the privacy of Americans all, in every state, in every corner of this great country. I want to thank NCTA and the U.S. Telecom and the CTIA for having us here today, Dutch and I, to discuss a vital issue for our national security, how we can harness the private sector's drive and innovation to better protect our national security in cyberspace. You know, I think back to the founding of the country, and right after our revolution, we were in horrible debt. The economy was a bit in shambles, but we had this very unique drive that the rest of the world had never seen before about developing industry and making a place because we could enjoy the fruits of our labors. And in about 20 years, we went from a wholly dependent colony of Great Britain to the industrial leader and then to become the industrial leader of the world. A lot of it was because of individual drive, but some were very clever. Some would go back to Great Britain and on back of napkins and other things copy the way that they were doing weaving and other textile type industry. And they had very tough, at that time, Great Britain had very tough technology transfer laws because they were trying to protect their textile industry and one of their greatest exports. Well, they took that information, came back, copied it, and in many ways helped us, the United States, drive to be this great industrial leader. Now, it wasn't a nation state that particularly engaged in that activity. It was individuals who had that individual drive, right? And intellectual property had a very different meaning then than it certainly does today. But through that individual drive and through that intellectual property appropriation, America became what it is today. And you think about what happens today, and there's some eerie similarities and some ways that I think ought to give us all pause. What happens every day in this great country, every single day, millions and millions of times a day, an individual, a nation state, is trying to get into systems, either cause some disruption or in fact steal intellectual property. Now, we've never seen something that happens in today's economy like we've ever seen in the history, I think, of the world. That some nation states would dedicate their resources for the purposes of economic espionage to both weaken the economy of a foreign nation and develop their own economic base to compete with the rest of the world on stolen property, with stolen property. Pretty amazing thing when you think about it. There is a cyber war that is going on today. Most Americans are consumed by other things, trying to get their economies, of their local economies in gear and get back to work. All of those things are happening as we speak. We know that capabilities of nation states to conduct cyber attacks that would disrupt systems that could cause economic catastrophe in countries around the world. And we've seen instances around the world where nation states have done exactly that. The threat is real, and our protections are not quite where they need to be. So we sat down, Dutch and I, when we first took over as a chairman and ranking member of this committee, and said there are a lot of things that we need to do to get this committee back in order. And we need to do it in a bipartisan way, a way that said that reflects American values in our national security interests. And most Americans don't submit that they're a Republican national security person or a Democratic national security person. They would submit to you that they're for the protection of America. So we took that guide, and we have done a lot of things together. And this bill is a great example of it. I want to talk to you about just one case and tell you how it can affect us so negatively here. There was a company called DigiNotar. It's a Dutch company. It's a subsidiary of an American company. It has a very recent public example of the damage that's being done every day by cyber espionage, and it proves this point that it's happening every day, and some companies are willing to talk about it and some are not. But it is suffering real economic damage to countries here in the United States, certain our European allies, and our Asian allies as well. In case you haven't heard of them, Did You Know TAR provided their customers digital certificates that they could use to securely identify themselves on the internet, establish encrypted connections for web transactions like e-banking. Did You Know TAR was one of a handful of companies, like Verizon, whose certificates are trusted by all major browsers. Unfortunately, they were hit by an advanced cyber espionage attack last summer. Stole sensitive information that would allow the attacker to imitate another company online. For example, to pretend to be Google or IBM. As a result of the attack, public confidence in the company's core business was destroyed, and that company declared bankruptcy just a few short months later. In the blink of an eye, a significant internet company was wiped out by a cyber attack. Now, not huge in the scope of companies, but certainly significant in the scope of any economy hoping to recover. And when you look at the companies who have had intellectual property stolen, that property taken back, commercialized in a nation state engaged in that cyber theft, and used to compete illegally, I would argue, against that nation, the threat that poses to the economic prosperity of America is staggering. And we have to do something. We need to do something now. This is an unprecedented heist, the Did You Know TAR, which some would estimate if you added up that particular company and all of the intellectual property theft, it would cost up to $1 trillion per year worldwide. That includes theft of the crown jewels of our economy, intellectual property created by American ingenuity and housed on U.S. corporate computer networks. This intellectual property is the product of massive capital investment in research and development, and it is vital to creating American jobs and protecting our way of life. Today, this stolen intellectual property is being used in the international marketplace against the very companies that spend time and money to develop it. Make no mistake, American private industry is not just waiting around for Washington to solve all of its cyber problems. The American private sector is working incredibly hard to protect itself and has attracted some incredibly good talent to this particular sector of our economy. And it's actually developed many of the leading edge technologies in network defense, including those used by the United States military. In fact, many sectors of our industry already do a pretty doggone good job of protecting themselves from cyber threats, and U.S. markets are providing better and more affordable cybersecurity options for American companies. The best thing that we can do is to remove the barriers that make it hard for industry to share information and defend themselves, and to provide government information in support of these efforts. Our intelligence agencies collect important information overseas about advanced foreign cyber threats that could dramatically assist the private sector. That information is in the intelligence community's unique value added when it comes to our cybersecurity. Unfortunately, we're not getting the full value of those intelligence insights the government needs to be able to share this threat intelligence so that the private sector can protect its own networks. There is some innovative work being done in the Department of Defense under a program called the Defense Industrial Base Pilot that suggests a way forward in changing this paradigm. This program provides a trusted internet service providers with classified cyber threat information to help protect defense companies that voluntarily request such assistance. Initial results for this pilot are very promising. We must refine, expand, and build on these innovative efforts so that they can help protect the broader private sector across our network systems across the United States. We must also modernize the law to give the private sector clear authority to identify threats and share this information within the private sector, as well as with the government on a voluntary, anonymous basis. At the same time, we must ensure that the privacy of all American citizens is protected and that any information voluntarily provided to the government is properly safeguarded. To do so, we must ensure that the government's Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board is functioning and conducting strong oversight over information our government gets from the private sector. We must also ensure sensitive threat or vulnerability information is not disclosed without authorization. Finally, we must ensure companies who do the right thing by looking for cyber threats and sharing information are protected from frivolous lawsuits. These effects will empower the private sector, which already does significant work to protect computer networks, to do even more. If we're going to win this fight, we have to have more centuries on guard. And what this bill will do is leverage every private IT security operation in every company in America to be on guard to make sure that all of our networks and all of our systems. This will be the first sentry on duty to make sure that the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the other nation states, individual hackers, thieves are caught before they penetrate your systems. It will create jobs in the information technology sector, no doubt, while also protecting jobs that depend on American intellectual property. Today, Dutch Ruppersberger and I, joined by several other key members of our both sides of the aisle, will introduce legislation to move us forward. Our legislation is concise. The current draft weighs in at just 11 pages. Maybe that's news in and of itself. You can actually read the bill. It's fantastic. And narrowly targeted in plain English so we can achieve the goals I just outlined. We worked through the Mac Thornberry's task force. The White House has been invited to every meeting. We have engaged the White House, both Dutch and I, and our staffs have done that throughout the process. We have engaged the companies who can be most beneficial in impacting the most networks to make sure that this legislation meets their needs as well as the government needs as well. It will allow the government to share cyber threat intelligence with companies in operational usable form so they can prevent cyber spies from getting anywhere close to our intellectual property assets. It will also modernize and clarify existing laws to permit you to better defend yourselves, including providing clear, positive authority to allow companies to identify threats to computer systems and to share cyber threat information with others in the private sector. It also provides authority to allow you to share threat information on a purely voluntary, anonymized basis as needed with the government. Our bill will not require additional federal spending. It will not require the creation of vast new government bureaucracies. It will not impose additional federal regulation or unfunded mandates on the private sector. To the contrary, it will be critical, bipartisan first step in enabling Americans' private sector to do what it does best, create, innovate, and sell. I'd like to talk briefly about some of the attacks we expect to hear, or certainly some of the criticisms we expect to hear on the bill that we'll be introducing later this morning, Dutch and I. I expect that some will allege that the bill creates a new wide-ranging government surveillance program. This is false. The bill has nothing to do with government surveillance. It simply provides clear authority to the private sector, not the government, to identify and share cyber threat information. And remember what the threat is: up to $1 trillion a year in lost intellectual property. The one thing that has set America apart from every other nation is our innovation and our intellectual property. If we lose that game, we lose this fight. Moreover, the bill only permits sharing of cybersecurity threat information when a company is engaged in the protection of its own systems or networks or those of the corporate customer. Our bill does not require anyone to provide information to the government. Any sharing of information with the government is completely voluntary every step of the way. A government surveillance program that doesn't require any information privileged to the government shouldn't be a very good surveillance program. No, I couldn't believe it. As an old FBI guy, we would say that is an unworkable event. In addition, the bill specifically permits the private sector to restrict the information it shares, including anonymizing and minimizing the data shared, including threat information shared with the government. They get to make that determination. I am also sure that some will say that our definition of cyber threat information in the bill is too broad and permits private sector companies to monitor and obtain all manner of information not related to cybersecurity. This is simply not true. Under our bill, a company may only identify and share cyber threat information for cybersecurity purposes. And this is only when they are seeking to protect their own systems or networks or those of their corporate customers. We've had a great conversation with many of you in industry over the last few months, and I appreciate the great feedback we have gotten from all of you that have helped us improve this bill. So from government agencies to the private sector, to the White House, to members of Congress, this is truly a group effort on how we take this very, very, very important first step in protecting our networks. We're still wide open to feedback and input. We'll continue to work with the broader cyber community to make sure we get this right. You are the ones that will have to work within this framework, so we do want to hear from you. We are also going to need your support to get this signed into law. If you think we're on the right track, please tell your friends, tell your members of Congress, and make sure that they all understand how important this piece of legislation is. There are a lot of members of Congress in both the House and the Senate that need to hear from the individuals and companies in their districts and how important this issue is and how important this legislation is to have at least to have a fighting chance to protect their networks, their intellectual property, and the privacy of the Americans that use them. We're going to be talking about this bill a lot in the next few months. I'm looking forward to all the work that's going to be required to get this bill through the House and the Senate and put on the President's desk. I want to thank you again for your time this morning. And as I said, that eerily relationship between what happened in America is different in one major sense. There are countries today investing millions and billions of dollars into their ability to conduct cyber attacks and cyber economic espionage. And they're engaged today. There is a cyber war underway. We need to decide in America if we are going to stand tall and protect the very thing that allows us to be the world's largest economy. I argue we can do it. I argue we should do it. We spent a lot of time talking about the asymmetrical warfare that happened after 9/11. And right under our nose, there is asymmetrical warfare being conducted with little notice. The one difference is they tore buildings down. In a case like this, it means a building will not go up, affecting our economy for today and into the future. So I thank you all for your participation, for the companies who helped get us on the right track on how they might be able to volunteer information. Thank you very much. For the government agencies who worked with us, to the White House, and to my good friend, Dutch Ruppersberger, who worked with us every step of the way on this bill. This is truly a group effort. I want to say thank you very much. We may be the only committee left in this town that is working together. And maybe that's because he's the old prosecutor and I'm the old FBI agent. So not to say we haven't had our shouting matches. We have. But they're usually followed by a glass of wine, which makes everything okay, I always find. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dutch to come up and just say a couple of words, if we can, before we take some questions. Is that all right, Michael? Thank you very much. Thanks, Dutch.
Good. Mr. Chairman, good job. Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. Michael, Steve, and Walter, thank you for having us here today. This is a very important issue. Steve, I'm an avid Ravens fan, and I know the Ravens are doing very well, but your team beat us, so don't feel too bad. Losing to the Redskins, that's kind of an embarrassment, but what can I say? And I do want to say this. I really want to thank Mike for the leadership. A lot of life and politics should be about relationships and trust. And I did remind Mike, as he brought it up, a good FBI agent always listens to his prosecutor, even if he's in the minority. But when we first got into leadership, we were on the Intelligence Committee together for a period of time, and we weren't doing as well because of partisan politics. We weren't doing the oversight we needed and working with the other agencies to do what's right for our country and national security. So we made a commitment. We would do everything we could in a bipartisan way and work together on issues that were important. An example, we can't say the exact number, but we did what we needed to do. We were able to cut over $1 billion from our budget without affecting mission. And that's extremely important because we did the job. Another thing that we did, it wasn't just about Mike and I, it was about our staff. Too often in this town, you have the staffs going at each other, and they seem to have a lot more influence sometimes than they should. And we made sure that our staff would work together on all of these issues. And it's very positive. This is what we're doing and why we're here today to have this bill. People ask me, and you're on the Intelligence Committee, what keeps you up at night? Because we hear things all over the world in very serious matters. And the two issues to me are weapons of mass destruction, and the other is cyber. I was involved, chairman of the Technical Tactical Committee on the Intelligence Committee about 4 years ago. And Admiral McConnell and Melissa Hathaway were briefing me about, in that capacity, about cybersecurity. And I really didn't know a lot until that. And when I realized how serious this was, we knew that we had to step it up and do what we needed to do to take care of this issue and provide our country the security that we needed. Unfortunately, most people in this country don't know what cybersecurity is about. They don't realize the attacks that are there. And when the public don't know, a lot of the elected officials don't know. So it's our job not only to put this bill in, but to make sure the public understands that cyber is a serious threat, not only as far as money, privacy, but also destructive threat. We know North Korea just attacked a major banking system in South Korea. That can happen today in the United States of America. And some of our key people predict, and I feel this way too, this is Dutch Ruppersberger talking, we will have a catastrophic attack within the next year. Whether it's attacking a banking system, a grid system, this is going to happen, and we have to make sure that we protect ourselves. Now, this will be basically the first bill that is put in the area of cyber. As Mike said, it's basic, it's direct, and there's been a lot of negotiations between Mike and I and members on my side and the members on his side. And Mike's leadership was very strong, and he was willing to listen to what my side talked about. One of those areas was privacy. We have to deal with the issue of privacy. So we worked it through with you all, with both sides, and I think we've come together to deal with the issue of privacy. The issue of good faith requirement was something that we felt had to be put in the bill. The issue of litigation. We didn't want lawsuits to continue on, frivolous lawsuits. That would take away of our mission, your mission, our mission, to protect our constituents and our country. We also felt very strongly about the issue of oversight. And the oversight, what the bill basically will say, there'll be an amendment to the bill, is that we will have the DNI will have their Inspector General make a report once a year to Congress about what we're doing. Why we really brought that up after we passed the Patriot Act, and I voted for the Patriot Act, there were some mistakes basically made, if you remember the FBI and the letters that went out. So we want to make sure that we're on top of this. If there are any problems, we'll have to deal with it, and we're going to make sure that the public understands and knows that this is not about listening or getting information or privacy. And what the bill basically does is, in 1947, there was a bill, the intelligence bill, that really created what the rules and regulations were for CIA, NSA, and all of the intelligence agencies. And what this bill basically does is allow a government entity, in most situations the NSA here, it allows them to give information to the private sector. The 1947 bill says if it's classified information, you cannot give it to the other side. And how the bill really came together was this DIB pilot program. It's a pilot program that allowed the NSA, working with the providers, I believe it was AT&T, it was Verizon and Quest, and allowed them to give that information over to the private companies to work to help protect themselves. That worked extremely well, and as a result of that, we kind of modeled our bill after that. Now, I want to say this because it's important now that we open up for questions. We need everyone's help in this room. We need to market how serious this threat is. It's so easy. We do a lot, Mike and I and our committee works in terrorism. It's so easy for a terrorist group, a radical group, to pay a very intelligent hacker $2 million to go and attack our banking system, our grid system, our airports, our air traffic control, all these different areas. So if we work together, we're going to move forward. We need, as Mike said, for you to talk to your people who represent you and your states and your area, all of your special interest groups. I'm going to be working on my side. Mike's going to be working on his side, and we'll be better for this. Mike, you want to come up and start the questions?
Thanks, Dutch. We'll take some questions from the audience now. We've got some microphones on either side of the room. If you have a question, if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself and which organization you're with, and then ask your question.
Good morning. It's Pam Benson from CNN. A couple of critiques of the bill that have already come out. One is that there's no information sharing entity or center created to effectively implement it. And some have suggested this combined with maybe the Lundgren bill, which would do that, would make a better overall cyber proposal. I don't know if you agree with that. And the second would be that this calls on the Civil Liberties Protection Board to do an annual review, but that board is yet to be functional. There aren't enough members. I don't know if there are any members on it. How would you respond?
Yeah, we are neutral on the agency that would oversee it. I think the administration is going to make that final determination. One of the things that we wanted to do was get moving on the fact that we had a very key problem. This is why this bill is so simple. That we have classified information that would be very beneficial on possible threats to networks that under current law and under the current arrangement cannot be shared with the private sector. How do we do that? That's the premise of which we started. So the bill that you see reflects that. We made no determination on what agency, because there's going to be a lot of advocacy on behalf of a lot of agencies on where this ought to go. And our argument was that really wasn't our jurisdiction to get into that fight. Our jurisdiction was on the classified portion of information and how we would transfer that to a place in the private sector that can use it to protect their networks. Again, we're neutral on the subject. We think the administration will have the ability to put it anywhere they need to put it, and we think that's the appropriate place for that authority to lie. And I'll let Dutch talk to the second part. It is something that we did and are addressing in the bill.
Okay, well, I think you might have gotten the first copy of a bill when you talked about the oversight. This is all part of the negotiations. We didn't just show up and say we're friends and we're going to pass the bill. There's been a lot of heavy and hard negotiations back and forth. And the group that initially was going to provide the oversight still, I don't believe there have been enough appointments on that committee that it exists as an entity, but it's not operating. So one of the amendments, and Congressman Thompson from California is raised the issue, and he's going to have an amendment in the bill that we're going to work through and mark up. And basically, it's going to be the IG of the Intelligence Committee that exists now, whose job it is to provide the oversight. And it will be the IG's responsibility to review and to make a report to Congress every year. And we didn't want to wait for the appointments to come. We wanted to move forward. And because the threat is imminent. The threat can occur tomorrow, and a destructive threat. And so this is why and I give Mike the credit in his leadership. There's a lot of pushback at first, but after we negotiated, we came together on this issue. So that will be in the bill, that oversight. Okay?
Good morning, Riley Repko, Virginia Tech. When you start talking about this man-made domain, in essence, cyber is the ultimate partnership activity. Part of the sensitivity I see, and you referred to the DIB pilot, I participated in the Endurance Security Framework at NSA, and part of my sensitivity here is that the preponderance of intellectual capital resides with the small to medium-sized companies. And part of the sensitivity here is how are you going to ensure that you can also leverage that innovation? Many times you tend to reach out and leverage, the large companies, and people argue that they move at the same pace as government. But, those that can breach move a heck of a lot faster. And many times the solution resides with those small to medium-sized innovative companies, and many times they feel left out. Is there a thought process in leveraging that community?
Sure. One of the goals here is to create a process for certification to bring people into that on the classified portion of sharing. So we put that authority in the DNI, which we thought was wholly appropriate. Those companies are recognized, respected, and utilized today to some degree, to varying degrees, with the intelligence community today, various elements of it, NSA and other parts. So what we do through that process is there's going to be an evaluation of what value that particular company, can they handle the classified information and make sure that's not disclosed, number one, important to get that certification. And the second part of that is what value, if they have that information, how many people can we impact? So this will be done in phases. So that first phase is how do we impact as many networks as we can, as quickly as we can, and then it's going to continually march out. So I don't see how they won't be included. They might not be included up front, but they'll certainly be included as we work through. And here's the good news on the DIB project. They made the mistakes on the DIB project, and it was a little slow in getting started, and they had some fits and starts. They have gotten that to where it works pretty well. So we took what we believe worked, and we learned from their mistakes, and now we're going to scale it up to try to cover the .com domain. And in that, some of that smaller company technology was an issue And so I think that's going to be a factor as we go through what is a certified entity by the DNI to receive classified information.
You know, the certified entity, we have to have that. We have to make sure that when we're working in this area and when you're receiving information from an intelligence committee or an intelligence agency, these people are cleared, that you have SCIFs, that you have the technology to protect privacy, to protect the things that we need to do. NSA actually is in my district. I think I'm the first member of Congress they could ever really talk to because I'm on the Intelligence Committee. And they have a system right now, a small business group that deals with small business. And because I represent the area, I have a lot of people come to me that say I have a product that's better than anything else, and usually we vet it. I have my staff look at that, and if they think it might be something, it will then eventually maybe go to the NSA. And by the way, usually we find out NSA is 10 years ahead of most of the people, but not all the time. So there are entities that exist right now for small business to be able to get involved. If you have the product, you're gonna be in the door.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Martinez. I'm from Politico. I wanted to see, you said that you consulted the White House when working on this bill. Have they voiced their support for the bill? And then also you mentioned NSA. Were they also consulted when this bill was being drafted?
We consulted the DOJ, the NSA, DHS, the alphabet soup of agencies we've had discussions with along the way, including the White House. And they have not opposed the bill. We have, there's still some issues that we're working through with the administration. But again, and our challenge to the IC community, to Congress at large, to the White House has been, don't dangle this bill up with all your hopes and aspirations of the final solution to cybersecurity. That's not what this bill does. This bill is the very narrow, very important first step in providing a forum to get classified threat information to the companies who can use it best to protect a broad swipe of networks across the country. So we're getting to the point where people are starting to understand, and that's why we have such strong bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle of cyber leaders in Congress. Mr. Langevin, Mr. Thornberry, Mr. McCall, and several others who have jumped on the bill. Mr. Ruppersberger, Adam Schiff is on the bill. So we have this good core group of bipartisan members who have invested time to understand the complexities of cyber. And the reason you can get all those people is because it was a very narrow focus bill. So once we get people to focus on what the intention of this bill is, and again, you'll see other cyber bills coming down the pipe, and we're not laying claim at all that this will solve all the problems. It will be a significant first step to solving the problems, and that's where we hope, if we can keep it to that, we're going to have the White House, we're going to have the Senate, we're going to have the House. That doesn't mean we won't have discussions along the way about, and we hope to continue to have discussions along the way as the bill moves through.
We've had a working group going on for a period of time with our staff. The White House has been invited to that group. They've attended, I believe, once or twice. I know my staff personally has had communication with the White House. There are some issues, and we're attempting to communicate. We'll be communicating with a representative of the White House today. But you have to go start somewhere. And I've been very frustrated. Those of us who really have specialized more in the cyber area, and there are not many on the Hill, I'm talking about members of Congress, that we're out there and we know this threat exists, and yet we haven't done anything about it. We are all talking about, what are we going to do here? We're going to have standards. What kind of bill? Are we going to have a bill as large as the health care bill? All these things that need to be done. We need to get the camel's nose in the tent. We have to get started right now. If we don't get it started now, who knows what's going to happen? So we've attempted, and again with Mike's leadership, he's come a long way, and a lot of issues of concern to us. And we've tried to address all the issues, and we will continue to address the issues. Remember, it's not a bill until the Senate passes a bill, and then it goes to the President. But by moving this bill today, we're putting it out. We feel that it's the right thing to do. We feel that we've addressed the majority of privacy issues. We're not going to solve and satisfy everybody anytime, but that's what a bill's about. They've referred to it as making sausage. Well, we've made our sausage and we're putting it out, and I think other people will now be involved with that. Yeah. Yeah. What?
Yeah. Can you say what some of those issues are that the White House that you're working through with the White House?
I can't hear you. What?
What are the issues that you're working with the White House on? Can you say?
You want to go on the?
Well, one of the things is those are conversations that are ongoing. We prefer not to discuss what are private conversations at this point.
Chris Strom with Bloomberg. There's no mandates or incentives in the bill. The bill says that the government can give private companies classified information, but the companies don't have to do anything with it. I mean, there's nothing that requires companies to do anything with it, and they're actually shielded from lawsuits if they don't do anything with it. How do you respond to the criticism that there's no teeth in this bill?
Well, the whole purpose of this bill is to create an environment where companies want to cooperate. And what I think you missed in that question is the fact that these companies are under assault every single day. In some cases, individual companies, tens of thousands of times a day. Individual companies, their IT shops can barely keep up with the number of assaults on these particular companies. You have a whole series of threats, from very, very, very sophisticated long-term threats that are on your computers to the quick dash, grab, and run assaults on your computer systems. And so the incentive is they're going to get access to information that will protect their systems. It is much easier to stop a threat if you know what you're looking for. And this bill will provide the forum for them to know what they're looking for. The IT shops are incredibly good. But if any CIO out there comes to their CEO and says, I got this thing handled, don't worry about it, I guarantee you they won't be CIO for very long. Because what they know as the threat and what the intelligence community can identify as a threat is very different. And so we're trying to make sure we close that gap. It is in their own best interests to cooperate. This costs these companies millions and millions of dollars. There's one particular company who told us that as many as 20,000 manufacturing jobs were lost. One company. Billions of dollars of R&D lost. One company. Imagine that these companies who are under assault wouldn't be running to this door to try to participate in this thing. And when we talk to the private sector, they're eager for this to happen. And what is their incentive? If they voluntarily cooperate, they don't get sued. It's the Good Samaritan law. When a doctor stops at the side of the road and resuscitates somebody, there are good protections out there so that doctor can't be sued if, God forbid, something goes wrong. Same with these companies. They don't want to be dragged through the mud. They don't want their company brand names to be tarnished. They just want to do the right thing and protect their networks. So this bill creates tons of incentive and provides the opportunity for them to get the information that they know for a fact will protect their systems. And that's why the bill looks the way it does, and why so many from the private sector, so many industries have stepped up and said this is the answer to getting us started and protecting our networks in a way we haven't had before.
Also, the issue about dealing with the White House, there is a requirement, and that is good faith requirement. And that was a lot of negotiation. It was raised on a lot of members on my side of the aisle, including me, and it was an issue of the White House. And again, in negotiation with the majority, with the chairman, it's a requirement to show good faith effort, and that's a standard. So it's not just total blank immunity in regard, but this is about protecting our country, and we're asking the providers and these companies to protect themselves, but to protect us. Remember, the Verizons and AT&T and the Quest, I mean, they're protecting a lot of people in their network, including the individuals. So that good faith effort is clear, and there was a lot of work to do that. That was an issue, one of the issues raised by the White House, and we feel that's been satisfied now. Yeah, this is easy.
Yeah. My gosh.
I guess it's because it's an 11-page bill, right?
That's exactly
Okay.
right. Well, great. We'll move on to the next. Well, thank you very, very much for being here. Thanks. We count on all of your support for this bill as it moves forward. Thank you, except for the press. But we'll count on your session.
Oh, yours, okay, got it.